Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. I want to introduce you to one of the most impressive young ladies I've had the privilege of meeting. I've had the privilege of meeting her a few times now. She's just, as we chatted about before the interview started, she's a force of nature. She's so busy. She's involved in so many different things. This is Dr. Georgette Zinaty. She is currently the Executive Vice President at Corporate Class Inc. and a practice lead for the Center for Diversity and Inclusion. She has executive and senior leadership experience at the University of Toronto. She's an alumni of the University of Toronto. She holds a bachelor's degree in English and political science, a master's of business administration degree from the University of Liverpool, a master's of science from the Henley School of Business, and a certificate on leading strategic change within organizations from Harvard University. And she also holds a doctorate in business administration, a joint program with the Rotman School of Business and the Henley School of Business. Her research focuses on business leadership, diversity, inclusion, and the future of leadership. She's also a professor at Western University, as well as the Rotman School of Business. Fantastic. And she's the founder of an organization called Women Helping Empower Women. Women Helping Empower Women. And she's recently written a book, which we're going to talk about. Dr. Georgette Zinaty. Wow. Woo. Phew. How do you do it all?
I work really hard and I hustle and I don't sleep a lot and I have a great support system. So yeah, that's what I do. And I love what I do. So when you love what you do, it's not really a lot of work. It's fun.
Fantastic. So you just published a book called Why Not You? Challenging Diversity and Inclusion Assumptions.
Yeah.
What was the inspiration for writing this book?
Well, you mentioned I finished my doctorate. So I spent a fair bit of time working on my doctoral work and research. And my research actually was both quantitative and qualitative. So, the funny story, of course, was when I was doing my defense, the panel sort of said, like, why would you do you literally did two theses here, in one. And so the quant work looked at 10,000 graduates from the same academic institution over a 50-year period across Canada, in Canada, across 26 sectors. And I looked at sort of the disparity between men and women to say, well, if we looked at people over time with the same sort of academic qualifications, do we see a difference? And does that gender gap close, given that women actually were graduating at a faster pace than men in the last 25 years with more degrees? And the answer was no. I mean, the gap was closing, but there was still a gap when you looked at senior leadership roles, which is basically reaffirmed by the existing data. So the gap is closing a little bit, and certainly in some, in consulting, the gap is a little smaller. But, for example, in education, if you looked into sort of that particular sector where women in my data set, 75% of the people that were in education were women, that 25% of men were still in positions higher than women. And so I said, okay, well, that reaffirms kind of what we know. But some women are still making it to the C-suite. So why is it that, one woman makes it and I'm kind of like hovering or just below? So what is it about me that kind of was holding me back and that woman got ahead? So then I did qualitative interviews, these deep dive interviews. And so that's really where the rich stuff was happening. That was really where like aha moments were happening. And so that kind of became another part of my research. And so that happened, and I kind of was thinking, how do I use that and share that knowledge? And then I got the opportunity to teach at Western, and it's a diversity, inclusion, and equity course. And then I thought, I could probably take my knowledge and put that into a book, and kind of, So the students were my guinea pigs on the digital version, and it was great to get their feedback. And so then we just literally published. This is actually at the print right now. And so I wrote the book, Why Not You? And it's actually not that academic in the sense that there's really, like me, it's very practical. There's really good practical tools for people. So there's some research, but there's a practical bit. And 100% of the proceeds from the book go towards women helping empower women. So every dollar that people spend on the book goes directly to help our nonprofit. And of course, our nonprofit's 100%. Everything we do is free for women. So it's So then it kind of created this really great full circle of being able to give back to women. Yeah.
So tell us what is WOO then, this Women Helping Empower Women? What's this not-for-profit?
Yeah, so that was another thing, for me, when I made a career shift, I wanted to be able to give back. And, when I was at U of T, I was there for a long time. And, it's very hard when you realize you're sort of one of the few women at a very senior leadership role, and the challenges that come with being that. And so what I really wanted to do is I also recognize you also have a place of privilege when you're in those roles because you're able to create opportunities. So I wanted to be able to give back. So one of the things that we wanted to do was create a nonprofit, and how can I use my knowledge, the things that I know, the things that I learned from my research. And so we provide training opportunities, we provide mentorship, we provide all sorts of supports. And in fact, we actually even recently launched a program called WISE, which stands for Women Innovators, Shakers, and Entrepreneurs. And what we wanted to do, so in our first year and a bit, we did a lot of training and so forth, and we continue to do that. And everything we do is free because we recognize not everyone can afford to pay for some of these things. So it's our way of giving back. And so it's women helping empower women in that regard. And then we said, I was thinking about how do I take it to another level? How do I shine a light and amplify female voices that don't have the opportunity to do that? And so, how do you help someone who's just starting out and can't afford a website or can't afford, whatever it is that they're doing? So what we decided to do was create this WISE program so people can nominate, themselves or each other or whatever. And what we would do is actually amplify their voices on our website, through our LinkedIns, through our Instagrams. And, we would shine the light on their stories and be able to recognize these women. So, there's different categories for them, but it was a way to kind of be able to really lift these other women and women lifting each other up in a way that's actually meaningful and impactful.
Remind us what WISE stands for.
Women Innovators, Shakers, and Entrepreneurs.
Women Innovators, Shakers, and Entrepreneurs. Women helping empower women. My God, fantastic. We're going to take a break. And you know what? It's a pleasure chatting with you because some people say I speak loud, I speak fast. I've never met anyone that can speak faster than me until you. So it's wonderful engaging in a conversation with you. We're going to take a break for some messages. We're going to come back in just 2 minutes with Dr. Georgette Zinaty, the founder of Women Helping Women. Stay with us, everybody. Welcome back, everyone, to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. We're chatting tonight with Dr. Georgette Zinaty, Dr. G, she likes to be called. She's the founder of Women Helping Empower Women, however you pronounce it, I don't know. And I love this WISE, what was it again? Women
Innovators, Shakers, and Entrepreneurs.
Women Innovators, Shakers, and Entrepreneurs that they're supporting. Sounds pretty impressive. This book about Why Not You? Challenging Diversity and Inclusion Assumptions. What are the biggest takeaways from the book?
Oh my gosh, yeah. So there were so many, so there's lots of great content. So I'm going to tell you, the book covers a lot of really interesting stuff in terms of just some of the data that's out there, some of the changes, some best practices. But I'll tell you kind of the aha moments. So there's lots in there to cover. I'm not going to cover all of that because it's a book, but I will tell you some of the aha moments that I think I found in the interviews that I conducted. And there's also some really a great chapter I dedicate only to the women and their narratives. So there's a whole chapter where women speak for themselves. And I didn't edit that. I thought I'm going to give them their stories to share because I wanted people to hear their stories through their own voices. But I will tell you what was fascinating when I was doing my interviews was that women did not help other women. And that was a bit of an
women don't help other women. Why?
No. Part of it is I think we're conditioned when we're young. There's a little bit of female misogyny that happens. There's also a little bit of
female misogyny. Isn't that an oxymoron?
No, it happens. Women are generally, I think it's becoming much better. I think this generation is much better. We're talking about it a lot more, but I think also when you have grown up and there are not a lot of women role models, it becomes, and you see one or two at the top, you think, well, that's all that there is. But the more role models that we have, the more opportunities that we have, the more that you see, it makes it a little bit easier for you to think, well, maybe we can have 6 of us in leadership positions on a board instead of just the one. And so that changes the dynamic a little bit.
I've heard from a lot of female executives that the worst mentors were other women and the best mentors were other men.
So I would say for me, my biggest champions in my life have always been men, quite frankly. For me, that has definitely been my experience. And so certainly when I was doing my qualitative research, this was partway through, and I remember just thinking, okay, wow, I thought that was just my personal experience. I didn't realize other women were experiencing the same thing. And so that was like an aha moment. And so that isn't to say all women are bad, for sure. That's not the case. Absolutely. There are some stellar women that are fantastic and support. I like to think of myself as one that opens doors for other people all the time, because I feel like, if I help another woman, you're not taking anything away from me. Like what is meant for me is for me, and what is meant for you is for you. But there are, women historically, and certainly I would say, but I do feel the next generation is a little different. And that's because they're seeing more female role models, and they know there's more opportunity. So that mindset is changing, but certainly I think people at my age and are certainly have not experienced that. The role of a partner was very interesting. So my group, I didn't know when I selected the group who was married, who wasn't married, if they had a partner, they had a boyfriend or a girlfriend or whatever it was. I had no idea. But what was really interesting was those that were quite successful had a very supportive partner or support system in their life. And so that was really interesting. So I tell women, it's great that when you're dating whoever it is that you're dating, great to be in love and all that is fantastic, but you've got to have the difficult conversations about what your expectations are. I mean, Brian, I know you have a daughter. I have a daughter. So my conversation is great to be in love, but you got to have, if you're ambitious and you want to have a career, you need to make sure that that person knows exactly what that is. And in fact, there was a great Harvard study that was done by Robin Ely that talked about how women who are HBR, Harvard Business School graduates, actually were very unsatisfied with their careers when they got married, because they ended up having to take a back seat to their husbands who became much more successful. And as we know, the data shows men tend to do better than women, career-wise. The other thing was networking.
Can you have it all? Can you have a great relationship and be a successful female executive?
Well, so I feel like I do, but I feel like I also have lots of conversations with my partner. And I think I certainly have had, we set the ground rules early on. I mean, he knew what he was getting. So I'm just going to say that. So, when we were having, he has very different personalities, but I think also, we talk about everything. It literally is a partnership. Like, when he wants to do something, it's sometimes I'll have to take a back seat when I want to do something. So but he's incredibly supportive of everything that I do. So, and what does having it all actually mean and look like, Brian? So I'd have to say that's the other part. Like, I don't know what all is. All is what is important to you at that time. So what is all, for people. So for me, it's all is what's important to me in that moment. And I have certain things that are priorities, and our family is always a priority. So for us, our family, what's best for our family is always the priority. And so, I have said no to career moves at times when I just didn't think it was the best for our family. And I don't regret any of those decisions because we're happy. And so that's what I would say to you too. Like, you have to kind of decide what's best at the end of the day. Like, I've had opportunities where I've said, I just don't, like, money-wise, it would have been great. Career-wise, it might've been like a huge leap at the time, but it would have moved our family in places that I'm not sure would have been good for everybody else. It would have been great for me, but not everybody else. And so for me, it was not that's not all. If I'm happy and the rest of the world is miserable. So life is great. Like, it worked out fantastic. So it's having conversations, right? It's kind of making sure that you're both in a good place. The other part I would say is networking. Women don't network well. We need to network up, as I say, not just across. So are you kind of connecting yourself properly to the people that are going to open doors for you down the road? Or are you thinking about boards you want to be on? Are you planning that trajectory well? So are you kind of hanging out with people that are kind of like you, rather than people are going to help you open, the next career move that you want to make, and what does that look like? Career choices. So often, if you look, I tell people it's great to follow your passion, but if you really want to be like someone who's making a lot of money, and that's a big thing for you as part of your value system, and that's, you want a certain lifestyle, HR is not going to do it. Following a career in HR, not going to happen. Maybe if you want a Wall Street job, got to get financial acumen, you got to follow the right career path. Taking risks. So women don't take enough risks. We tend to make these little micro steps in our careers. And men, when you look at men take risks, make pivots in their careers, make all sorts of changes, take leaps. We don't do that as well. We're a little bit more conservative. And then finally, I would say, the biggest thing was this intersectionality piece. So the women that were really, really successful, when I asked them to define how they saw themselves, Brian, they didn't say, oh, I'm this woman, or I'm this woman of color, or I'm this, whatever it was. It was, I'm an expert. When I walk into the room, I am like the expert in X, Y, and Z. And it was so fascinating. They never described themselves by their gender, ethnicity, or race, or anything like that. They sort of described themselves as this really strong, competent. And I thought, that is so cool, because that is what walked into the room. Everything else was back there. And so if that's what you're thinking, even when you're the only person and like the only female in the room, that is what everybody else saw. So if you're not walking in with that extra baggage, that could be the tipping point in our mindset. So that mindset shift was critical. And that was like, that is what's making the difference for these women. They're not walking in like, oh, I don't know. They're walking in like, I'm owning this space because I'm really good at what I do and I'm the expert and I don't see myself any different. And that was the difference.
Fascinating. So let's summarize. So first of all, you said that women don't help women enough, and they got to find some mentors that are men, or we got to have
women helping empower women. People
we got to have a seismic shift that women start helping women more. Second of all, finding the right partner that supports you is critical in life. Third of all, it is that you've got to network up as well as beside. And then fourth is you got to be willing to take risks in your career. And then finally, you said that you got to leave the baggage of being female or being racialized or being whatever it is that may have defined you previously, that you just come in as the best possible you.
I wouldn't call it baggage, but I would say it's your confidence in knowing that you're really good at who you are. So I wouldn't call that baggage because that's part of your intersectionality. But I would say when you walk in, what's walking in is knowing that you are so good at the expert that you are. So don't have the confidence to walk in knowing. So that other part is still who you are, but that's the part that's walking in is that expert, that knowledge that I'm good and I'm equal, not lesser than in any way. And those other parts of me are there, but the part that's walking in is the expert.
It's interesting because so much of the diversity inclusion sort of thinking has been that companies aren't diverse enough and aren't giving females or racialized people enough chances. What you're suggesting is that some of the challenges is with the females themselves.
Well, so first of all, there's both. So part of it is, yes, women do hold themselves back, absolutely, because I think we don't take the risks and the chances and the opportunities. So absolutely, that's there. But the other part is your organizations are not doing enough, Brian. They're not doing enough. So we see that in terms of the hiring practices. We see that in terms of, systemic bias in the system. And we know this because the data is there. We know this when you look at job applications, there's data to prove that, when a person with an ethnic name has to apply 3 to 4 times more, send out more resumes than a person with a white sounding name to get a job interview. So we know that actually exists. There's data to prove that. There's research studies to show that. So we do know that actually exists in the workplace. We've seen bias happen at the table when, there's even data around academic research, when women, female faculty apply compared to male faculty apply, and the biases that happen when we look at, files that go forward. So we know that actually exists. So we can't say it's one or the other. So that those biases are still at play. But what I'm also saying is women also have to kind of step up and say, I'm going to go take some risks and own my own space.
What can organizations do to create greater inclusion and belonging?
I think part of it is, obviously there are people do training, and I think training is good. And I conduct training through corporate class, often. But I always say that's a baseline. That's a good starting point. So what else are you doing? So how are you hiring? How are you recruiting? Where are you recruiting from? What are those questions? How are they shaped? And then how are you promoting? So, often people will say, well, we do this and we have to follow a process. And I think, well, I often tell this story, and this is a conversation I actually had with a friend of mine who's an academic. And they were talking about hiring this hire that they were having at their academic institution. And I said, would you ever consider somebody from, this particular institution in Ontario? And he said, well, no, we would never look at somebody from there. It's not it's not like UBC or Alberta or McGill, kind of thing. And I said, so let me ask you, is that inclusive? And he said, well, what do you mean? And he said, well, it wouldn't be the same. And I said, but you might be missing out on somebody brilliant. So, maybe Brian Crombie is actually like the most brilliant candidate. That's right. But maybe Brian had to go to a school, and maybe that isn't the UBC or the McGills of the world or the University of Toronto's of the world, maybe, or MIT's or Harvard. Maybe he had to go to a different school because he had to take care of his sick mom. And maybe his priority was to be closer to home so he could help pay the bills, be closer to home. And so maybe you're missing out on an exceptional candidate because you don't know the full story. So are we making a decision? Are you excluding because you don't know all the parts? And he actually said, that's a good point. We've never thought of it that way. And I said, so are we really looking, is the criteria really the criteria? Like, is it? Because it's not like, are you actually looking at the full person, or are you just sort of making decisions because, we think this is a good school, this is not? Are you really looking at the whole? And so I just think we need to be rethinking some of the decisions. We don't necessarily think of potential. And if you think about how some of the stuff is, minimum threshold, like, when I think about people I worked with at the university and people I hired, I often promoted people on potential, people who I could see had great opportunity and they flourished. They were great. So, and I'm someone with a lot of degrees. So you got to be able to balance both and provide opportunity.
We're chatting tonight with Dr. Georgette Zinaty, who is a diversity and inclusion expert, about a book that she's just recently published and about her diversity, inclusion, and equity training. We're going to take a break for some messages and back in 2 minutes with Dr. Georgette Zinaty in just a minute. Stay with us. Welcome back, everyone, to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. I'm having a hoot today, interviewing Dr. Georgette Zinaty, who is the founder of Women Helping Empower Women, BREW. And she's also the executive vice president of an organization called Corporate Class Inc., which is a consulting firm that provides training on diversity, inclusion, and equity. She is an assistant professor at Huron University at the University of Western Ontario. She's on the Forbes Coaches Council member. She's a visiting lecturer at the DeGroote School of Business. She was the executive director of advancement of the University of Toronto, and she spent 15 years at U of T in numerous different positions. She's got a DBA from the Henley School of Business, a doctorate in business, where she specialized in diversity, business leadership, and inclusion. She's got an MBA from the University of Liverpool, where she's got an MBA in marketing and strategic HR. Strategic AR, that should be an interesting conversation we should have at some point in time. And she's got a double major in English and political science at the University of Toronto. She's got a certificate in strategic leadership and executive presence. She's got a leadership executive advancement program and a strategic leadership and executive presence program. She's the director of the fund committee at the Creative Hub. She's a board member of Doyen Capital. She's a board member of, or was a board member of the Toronto Region Board of Trade. And she was the co-chair of the Canadian CHIPS chapter, and a board of advisor for Ella Women at York University, which is an incubator for supporting female entrepreneurship. Yeah. That is a lot that you're involved in.
Yeah. So I'm still the co-chair of CHIPS. We launched the Canadian chapter, and there's actually another chapter just starting as well. So I'm really proud of that organization because that stands for Chiefs in Intellectual Property. So that organization really supports the advancement of women in IP law, technology, and it's great. So it's a global organization, and this is the first Canadian chapter, and I co-lead it with another colleague of mine, Sharzad Ismaili, and a few other women on the board. So it's fantastic.
And you've just recently written and published a book. Tell us what the title of the book is and where we can get it.
Yeah, so it's called Why Not You? And it's called Challenging Diversity, Inclusion, Assumptions. And I always laugh because the picture I picked is like this, because half the time I'm sitting across the table from a woman going, so why not you? So tell me. I'm going to be saying to you, Brian, why not you? Why are you not doing this? And you can get it off our website because it's 100% of the profits go to Women Helping Empower Women. So if you go to www.women.com and you'll see it there. You can go under the shop tag and you can pick up the book, and it's $25 plus shipping and handling.
You've got double bachelor's, an MBA, a doctorate, a whole bunch of these other academic accolades and achievements. You're very successful in business. You've been a leader, a speaker, a consultant, an author, etc. Why do you want to achieve all this?
Well, I want to make a change, I hope. I mean, first of all, I thrive in this space. And I think it's important as an immigrant to Canada, as a woman, as somebody from a minority group in this country. I feel like it's important to have our voice heard. I also feel that I'm very lucky. Like in my dedication in my book, I actually thank my parents for bringing us to Canada. So because I also feel that I have been blessed to be in this country, because there are many things that I've been able to do here that I don't know that I would have been able to do if we didn't come to Canada. So the education, the opportunities that I have here. So I feel like, maybe I'm not as, I have privilege by being here and have had the education that I have. So I'm going to use my voice and place and the opportunities that I've created for myself. I have opportunities that have come and opportunities that I've created, and I'm going to use them to advance difficult conversations, and change the narrative as much as I can. I have children, and I'm going to have grandchildren, I hope, one day. And I want to make sure that whatever I leave behind is a place that's better than when I came. And so for me, that's really important. And if I can do that just a tiny little bit and change people's minds, and I know that we do, because when we do something through Rue, I have women that email me and say, I can't tell you just had a profound impact, or I did this, I took your advice and I did this, and you don't know how you changed my world. I'm like, yes. So, when that happens, it's like you gave me $1 million, honest to God. And so, it's meaningful work. It's meaningful work. It's rewarding work. And it's what fills up kind of my heart and soul every day. And so
I interviewed this fascinating professor from the London School of Business, London Business School, who wrote a book called Erotic Capital. And she said that females have, femininity, sex appeal, whatever you want to call it, beauty, that ends up benefiting them if they know how to use it. And then, lots of other people have said that if you want to be successful in business, you almost have to dampen down your femininity or your femaleness. Have you found that one way or the other?
I don't know. It's interesting. I think when I first started out, like working at the university, like I had longer hair and would wear makeup, and not everybody necessarily did that. So, I think I tried out different things, but I would say probably as I got older, I sort of thought, this is who I am. You like it, great. If you don't, I'm not going to dampen anything. This is, you got to accept me for me. And if it makes you uncomfortable, you have to ask yourself why you're uncomfortable, right? you can't change who you are. And as I said to you earlier, that's part of my intersectionality. So whatever sort of impression someone makes in the first 2 minutes, I hope that after you speak to me for a few more, you realize that, hey, she's pretty bright. She's a go-getter. Boy, I think she can get stuff done, or shit done, whatever word I'm allowed to use. And then, this is somebody I want on my team. And it's interesting because I was actually at an event not that long ago, and it was a VIP event, and I was the only woman in the room. And then actually there was one more that kind of came a little bit later. And I met a gentleman who actually said to me, he said, he actually wanted to bring me on his board. And I said to him sort of, what was it? And he said, I just loved how you worked the room, you commanded the room, you had such confidence. He said, it was just, I've never seen anyone kind of do that. And I thought, well, part of it was just being comfortable in your own skin, but I also did my homework before I went into that event. I tell people all about networking. Well, guess what? I looked up everybody before I went. I did my homework on stuff. I didn't just show up and go, hi, how are you? Nice to meet you. My name is so-and-so. I mean, I don't play that card either. I mean, this is what I go in with. And hopefully you'll see that in the next 2-3 minutes. I mean, I think you and I talked enough about that. So, I don't know. I'm not dumbing this down. And
so what do? You check people out on LinkedIn beforehand and decide who it is you want to try to meet before you go to an event?
So you're now talking about networking. And I would say if I was going, so I do a whole session on networking. And if I was telling you, if you're going to go networking at an event, it's important to think about, plan. So if I was going to a dinner party or a VIP event and it was a business, of course I'm going to want to know who's there. I want to know a little bit about them. I'm going to do a little bit of research. I do anyway, so that I have some talking points. So if I was meeting you for the first time, Brian, I would probably look you up a little bit and said, okay, well, what's, he's working on his DBA, this is what he does. He works at this company. So if I sat down and sat in that class, I'd say, so tell me a little bit about, what your background. Oh, you're working on, okay, that's fantastic. Tell me more. So we have something. So it's not awkward. I'm going to talk about the fish all night. But I just engaged you, didn't I? So
Yes.
I made it about you. I'm listening, I'm paying attention. And if there's a follow-up, then I just connected with somebody at a level that's meaningful to them. And I made an impression. So I went prepared. There's nothing wrong with that. It's being
So first of all,
strategic.
The thing you said is that you're authentic. You don't dumb yourself down or dim yourself down or brighten yourself up. You're authentic. You are who you are, which I think is important. People can read people that are inauthentic and trying too hard or not trying at all. And then I think the second thing you talked about was that you plan your interactions with people and you're strategic about it, and you find out who you want to meet and you make good use of those conversations. And then I think the third thing you said is that you connect with people intellectually, and that's key, is that you've got to know something about them.
And you hope, like, if someone, you posted about, your surgery, what was the first thing I asked you about?
You asked me about how my hip was, and thank you for that.
Because I care, because I saw, and you posted, but I do follow you. I genuinely do follow you. I don't just like tick off a box. I mean, but it was genuine.
That's very kind of you, and great lesson. I want to come back to this. I love this WISE. You created this new awards program called WISE, Women Innovators, Shakers, and Entrepreneurs. I love that. Women Innovators, Shakers, and Entrepreneurs. What's a shaker? Are you a shaker?
I don't know. I think I'm too old to be shaking. I'll be shaking different than young. So shakers are more sort of up and coming people who are kind of doing more, kind of starting out a little bit more. And that was sort of our idea, that we wanted to recognize people at all stages, because our membership in Woo, interestingly enough, when we started it, we didn't know whether we were going to get a demographic that was really young or, in the mid-age or older. And it's really all over. So we wanted to create a program that just captured everybody. And that's why we created the different categories.
And what is this WISE Awards?
It really is to recognize their contribution to their communities and what they're doing in terms of, whether it's their business or their little startups, or whether they're doing. So 11 of them are really sort of business facing and 11 are volunteer facing. So the idea was to do a play on 2022. Right. So 11 women, in one category, 11 in the other. And
when do you announce them?
In the fall, in November of 2022.
Well, I'd love to meet some of them.
11, get it?
I do. I'd love to have some of them on my show. So if you can introduce me to some of them, I'd appreciate it.
We'd love to do that.
That'd be a fun way.
We could do a roundtable dinner with you.
It would be a fun way to introduce them to the world and to interview them and to give them some publicity. You're also a frequent public speaker. There's a number of events that you're speaking at in the next little while. Tell me, number one, why you do that, and then tell me a little bit about the events you're speaking at.
Well, part of it, I think, is important. It's important to share knowledge, and if I have it and it's helpful, then I think it's important to do that. And I think part of it is this knowledge I share isn't just like, here's the data. I like to give practical tips that people actually end up using, and the feedback I get is, I had like a wow moment, and my gosh, that's so good, I'm going to do that. You even said just now, I said, this is how you work a room. So I do that for that. And part of it is, it's my way of giving back to communities and different communities. And the other part is, I think it's very good for business. It's good for profile. It's good for business. And, and it's a good way to share our messaging and make a difference for people and the impact. So this week, I'm doing a fireside chat with an organization called Mogul. So Mogul is headquartered in New York, but it's an organization that really does a lot of recruitment. It's an HR. They've got over 56,000 followers on LinkedIn. And the conversation is really around how to help women get on boards. So actually, it was interesting. They said, can you help us talk about how to create a resume? And I said, well, just a minute. Have you actually talked to women about how to create the path to get to the board? And they went, They kind of came, and I said, well, I'd like to kind of preempt that conversation a little bit with, well, what does the path even look like? Where do you begin before you get to the resume? You're assuming they're ready, right? But have you ever talked to women about how do you even plant the seed to get to that part? So we're going to do a little bit about that, and then what the resume should look like, and then how do you perform during the
Awesome.
board, and how do you
Awesome.
So that's one. And then on the 22nd to the 25th, I'm part of a couple of panels with the World Higher Education Ranking. So that was very much more about diversity and inclusion, and whether that should be an important factor in university rankings, which I think is an important conversation. That's a whole other session. But, when we look at it, we tend to look at all these research factors. But if we want inclusion to be important, should that be a new factor that universities should be measured on? Right? Like, are their faculty inclusive? How are the inclusion strategies happening in terms of when students come in? So I'm on a couple of panels on that, and that's coming out of Dubai. And that actually is endorsed by the United Nations as an organization.
Are you traveling to Dubai or doing it virtually?
No, virtually. We were going to go to Dubai actually, but with everything that's happening right now in the world and COVID numbers up in Ukraine, it moved to virtual, unfortunately. And then on the 23rd of April, I'm part of a conference called EWOW, and I'm going to be part of a panel called The Future of Work with some colleagues. I've done a similar panel with them. They're fantastic. And we're going to be talking about the future of work for women and women can do, given the different stages that women are in their careers. And then finally, I'm going to be part of the World Diversity and Leadership Conference, which is happening in Edmonton. And that is in June. And that is phenomenal. And I would encourage people to actually take time, if they can, to go to Edmonton and do that. So they've got the former Prime Minister of Australia there. They've got some really, really amazing speakers. It's a full week, but it really is a global conversation discussion on diversity and inclusion. And I'm going to be both moderating and speaking.
Quite the lineup. Very impressive.
Thanks.
We're going to take a break for some final messages and come back with some concluding comments with Dr. Georgette Zinaty in just a minute. Stay with us, everybody.
Yeah.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. We have probably the most impressive academic, business person, executive, diversity, inclusion, and equity person you can imagine having tonight, Dr. Georgette Zinaty, who has written a book recently called Why Not You? Challenging Diversity and Inclusion Assumptions. Show us the cover again. Why Not You? Challenging Diversity and Inclusion Assumptions. And all of the proceeds from this book go to her organization, Women Helping Empower Women. Women Helping Empower Women. Unbelievable. Dr. G, as she likes to be referred to, let me ask you, if you were speaking to my daughter who's in her early 20s, and starting out in the business world and wants to have it all. And, you said one of the things is you got to choose the right partner, and you got to network, and you got to get the right education, and, all the things that you said. What would you tell her? Is this a great world that she's entering into coming out of business school? Is it a scary one that's misogynistic with sexual innuendo constantly? What cautions would you give her? What would you tell my daughter?
Yeah, so your timing is perfect, because I've just been asked to create a quote that that they want to, there's an organization that just quoted RBG, and I was like, oh, you need a quote from me. I'm like, I don't know which one to go with. And I created these two different quotes, basically, that I give to women all the time. So one of them is challenge the norms and assumptions. And remember that if you don't ask for what you're worth, you're not going to get what you truly deserve. So ask yourself, what I tell women all the time, why not you? And that's so important, because I think, for young women, what often happens is they don't ask for what they're worth. They don't negotiate well when they come into a job. They tend to negotiate actually salaries lower than their male counterparts. And that carries with them through their entire career. So I think I would tell your daughter to do that. The second part is, as I said, own who you are, be confident in who you are. And if you're not sure about that, take some courses that actually will help you build. I run a masterclass for women where I train women on how to actually develop confidence in themselves. Because when you own a room, it's a whole different other. People cannot take that away from you. right? And so that's I think that's really powerful, and I think that's very important. And when also I think really successful women, we don't see barriers as obstacles. We see them as opportunities. So when I did my TED talk, I talked often about your cup isn't half empty, it's all full. That empty part is untapped opportunity. And so if you can see sort of all of the things that people tend to see as negative as opportunity for growth, then there's a whole chapter. It's called Your Cup Runneth Over. And so if you see it as that, then I think your cup runneth over. And so it's your perspective on the world will change everything.
So you're pretty positive. You're positive about the opportunities that anyone has coming into this world.
You know what? I think if you build a really strong network, and this is why it's so important, like who around you makes a difference. So who is your network? Who are your champions? Who's opening the doors for you? And I've talked about this before, you have a little advisory board of people who are going to be not your friends necessarily, but people who are going to be your champions, who are going to help you, they're going to open the doors for you. They're going to be the people who are going to say, you know what? You're fantastic. This person is fantastic. Can I make an introduction for you? That's who you want. And they're going to be the people that say, if you had a really bad day at work or you had some very negative feedback from your employer, then they're going to say, you know what, let's talk about that. And maybe there's some truth in that where we can do some coaching, right? To improve you, not to say, oh, don't worry about it, that person's had a bad day. They might actually say critically, maybe there's some, and let's help you develop professionally so we can take you to the next level in your career. Let's shove it under the rug and make you think that you're great. And then your career just plateaus. That is what you need.
Fantastic. If people want to get your book and or follow you, what's the easiest way for them to do that?
Yeah. So follow me on Instagram at Dr. Georgette Zinaty. And, you can find me LinkedIn, Dr. Zinaty. There's not too many of me. You can get my book at Women Helping Empowerment. So it's www.woowomen.com. So www.whewwomen.com. And if you go under the shop, you'll find the book there and you can pick it up.
Dr. Georgette Zinaty, thank you so much for joining us, and congratulations on publishing this book. Sounds fascinating. I want to get a signed copy of it.
You bet. Thank you. Thank you again, always, for the opportunity. I'm really grateful.
Well, that's our show for tonight. I want to echo, and this is relevant for males and females, some of the things that Dr. G has mentioned in regards to being confident in yourself, owning a room, networking, being authentic. I think there's a lot of truths in a lot of the things that Dr. G has been talking about. And as I said, relevant for everybody. That's our show for tonight. I'm on every Monday through Friday at 6 o'clock on 960 AM. You could stream me online at www.saga960am.ca. Even if you go to Dubai, you can stream me online from there. All my podcasts and video casts are available on briancrombie.com. And my videos are on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and YouTube. And my podcasts are on Apple, Audible, and Speakeasy Podcast. Thanks for joining us, everybody. Oh, SoundCloud too. Thanks. Good night, everybody. Thanks, Dr. G. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Brian. Thanks, as always.